My phone rang on a regular Tuesday just as I was getting ready to leave for work. I picked it up without thinking much, assuming it was another telemarketer or maybe one of those reminder calls from the dentist. But the voice on the other end was from a bank. The man asked if I was planning to make the overdue mortgage payment soon. I laughed nervously and told him there must be a mistake. I didn't own a house. Then he said my full name, my address, and my credit score. That's when everything inside me went completely still. Before everything went wrong, life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I worked 2 jobs. One at a local cafe during the day, and the other as a night shift clerk at a convenience store. I had a dream, a goal to one day own a small business of my own, maybe a little coffee shop. It wasn't a glamorous life, but I was working hard for it. Every cent I earned went into my savings. Every hour worked felt like it was bringing me one step closer to my dream. My credit score was something I prided myself on. I didn't have much, but I made sure to pay every bill on time and keep my finances in order. I never wanted to fall behind like some of my friends did. My parents were always proud of me for that, and I liked knowing I was setting a good example for my younger sister. Family meant everything to me. My parents were my rock, and I trusted them like no one else. I was close to them, maybe too close at times. I'd always been the responsible one, the one they could rely on, and I never minded. They had a way of making me feel needed, of making me feel important. But there was one thing I'd never admit to anyone, not even to myself, that I resented my sister a little. Growing up, she was the golden child. She had this charm that made everything she did seem effortless. While I was busting my ass to make something of myself, she seemed to coast by with little effort, always getting the attention and praise. I couldn't help but feel like I was the invisible one, always working behind the scenes while she took the spotlight. I loved her, of course, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she got more than her fair share of everything, and I was left struggling to build my own future. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was happy for her, that family was everything. But deep down I was always waiting for the day I could shine too. And little did I know that day would come, but not in the way I'd ever expected. It was a Wednesday morning when the letter arrived. It was in a plain envelope, nothing too unusual, except for the official-looking bank logo at the top. I figured it was just some routine paperwork, maybe a reminder about an old bill or something I'd missed. But when I opened it, I froze. The letter said I had an overdue payment on a mortgage I had no knowledge of. The balance was shockingly large, and the due date was just days away. My heart skipped a beat. What the hell was this? I didn't own a house. I'd never signed for one. My first thought was that it was some kind of mistake. But the letter had my full name, my address, and even my credit information. I immediately called the bank, my hands shaking as I dialed the number. The woman on the other end of the line confirmed it. Yes. We're calling regarding the mortgage on the property located at address. She didn't sound concerned, like this was just another call she made every day. I asked her to repeat the information, thinking maybe there was some mix-up with another person who shared my name, but when she read off the details, it was unmistakably my information. My name was on the loan documents. I told her this had to be some kind of fraud. There's no way I could be responsible for a mortgage I never signed. She told me to visit a branch and speak with someone in person. So I did. When I arrived at the bank, I demanded to speak to someone who could explain this to me. After what felt like forever, a manager called me into his office. He opened up the file and slid a few papers across the table. Your signature is right here, he said, pointing to a page in the loan document. I stared at the paper. It looked like my signature, but there was something wrong with it. It wasn't quite the way I wrote my name. And it definitely wasn't my handwriting. The manager seemed calm, almost like this was just another routine case for him, but to me it was my world shattering. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing. How could this happen? How could someone use my name, my credit, without my permission? I could barely breathe as I tried to process what I was hearing. The manager explained that the loan had been approved months ago, and that the payments had been going smoothly until now. It was my name, my credit, but someone had forged my signature. He didn't say who, but I didn't need him to. The pieces clicked together with gut-wrenching clarity. It was my sister. I could feel the blood drain from my face. The betrayal was suffocating. How could my own family, do something like this? I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. The anger bubbled up inside me, but all I could do was sit there, numb as the reality of the situation settled in. My sister had used my credit to buy a house and I had no idea. Not only had she betrayed my trust, but now I was the one left to clean up the mess. And all I could feel was the weight of the injustice bearing down on me. My credit was ruined and I had no idea how to fix this. The emotional wreckage was almost too much to handle. I left the bank in a daze, my heart racing, my thoughts spiraling. Everything I had worked for, everything I had planned, was now at risk and I didn't even know where to begin. How could they do this to me? How could my family betray me like this? I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront them. The betrayal burned through me like a fire I couldn't put out. I couldn't even look at my parents the same way anymore. So that night after work I went straight to their house. I needed answers. I needed to know how they could have done this to me, to my credit, to my future. When I walked in, both of them were sitting on the couch watching TV as if nothing had happened. It felt like a dream, but the reality hit me hard as I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but shaking with anger underneath. They looked at me, confused but not worried. I slammed the letter on the table. "You used my name. You used my credit to buy a house for her." I pointed at my sister, who was sitting at the kitchen table looking unfazed. Mom's face twisted in surprise, like she hadn't seen it coming. "Oh, sweetheart," she said in that calm, patronizing voice she used when she thought I didn't understand something. "We thought you'd understand." She paused, glancing at Dad for backup. "We needed your help. You have such good credit and, well, your sister couldn't get approved on her own." "Needed my help?" I snapped. "You never asked me. You went behind my back and forged my name. How is that help?" Dad cleared his throat. "It wasn't like that, honey. We just thought you wouldn't mind. You're doing so well with your finances. This was just temporary, a little favor for your sister." His words were smooth, like he was trying to make it sound like no big deal. But it was a big deal. My credit was at risk, my future was on the line. My sister, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke up, and her words cut through me like a knife. "You weren't using your credit anyway," she said, shrugging with a smirk. "I didn't see the problem. You're always so careful with money. It's not like you were planning to buy a house anytime soon." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a mistake. They had all been in on it. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about the consequences of their actions on my life. They thought they could just use me, manipulate me, and I would be fine with it because I wouldn't mind. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "You put me in debt and you think it's no big deal?" I was screaming now and I couldn't stop the tears. "You ruined my credit. You made me pay for something I didn't even sign for. And now you act like I should just let it go." They didn't say anything after that. My mom just looked away and my dad muttered something about how it would all work out. But I could see it in their eyes. They weren't sorry. They weren't going to take responsibility. They weren't going to fix it. They wanted me to just forgive them, to let them off the hook. I was left with one choice. I had to pay up. I couldn't afford to let my credit get ruined. It would destroy everything I'd worked for. So I drained my savings, borrowed money from a friend, and made the payment. I shouldn't have had to do that. But what else could I do? My parents and sister showed no remorse, no understanding. They just wanted to move on like it was nothing. But for me, this was everything. My trust in them was gone. And I knew things would never be the same again. It didn't take long for me to realize that things could never go back to how they were. The betrayal hit me harder than I ever expected. My parents, who I had always looked up to, had completely shattered my trust. And my sister, she was unapologetic, acting like everything was just a small favor that she was entitled to. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I couldn't. So I did what I knew best. I distanced myself. I stopped talking to them, stopped visiting. It hurt to cut them off, but every time I saw their faces, I just saw the people who had destroyed my future. I needed space to heal. But more than that, I needed to figure out how I was going to fix the mess they had created. I had dreams, plans for a business that meant everything to me. I had always dreamed of opening my own coffee shop, a place where I could finally be my own boss. But that dream was slipping through my fingers. My credit was ruined. Every bank I spoke to refused me a loan. The rejection was suffocating. All of my plans were crumbling because of something I had no control over. But I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them walk away from this. I began to quietly rebuild my life, piece by piece. I worked harder than ever at my 2 jobs, saving every penny I could. But more importantly, I started researching. I needed to know if there was anything I could do to fight back. I started looking into legal options, consulting with a lawyer in secret. I knew I couldn't afford to make a mistake, and I didn't want to get caught up in something I didn't fully understand. I also started recording everything. Every conversation with my parents, every phone call with the bank, I recorded it all. I knew I needed proof to back me up if I was going to have any chance at fixing this. I gathered documents, took screenshots of emails, anything that might help me in case this went to court. It wasn't easy. Every conversation with my family felt like a battle, but I couldn't afford to back down. I was scared. But I also knew I was getting closer to the truth. And I was going to make them pay for what they had done. I just needed to wait for the right moment. 2 years passed, and every single day felt like an uphill battle. The anger that had once burned so hot inside me had slowly started to cool, but the resentment? That only grew. My life was a series of small, painful steps forward, and yet, every night I stayed awake thinking about how to fix everything. How to take back control. I threw myself into learning. I signed up for night classes at a local community college, determined to learn everything I could about real estate and finance. I needed to understand how I had gotten into this mess in the first place, and more importantly, how I could get out. I studied for hours after working my 2 jobs, exhausted but determined. I learned the ins and outs of credit, property law, and how the financial system worked. Every class was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt like giving up, but I refused to. In the meantime, I found a new job in property management. It wasn't the dream job I had imagined, but it was a start. It gave me an inside look at how real estate transactions worked, how properties were bought and sold, and how people made their fortunes. I spent my days at work studying everything I could and my nights attending classes. Slowly but surely, I started to piece my life back together. What my family didn't know was that I was secretly building my credit again. It was a slow process, and it took months of patience and sacrifice. I paid off old debts, kept my spending to an absolute minimum, and slowly began to repair the damage that had been done. Every time I checked my credit report, I could see the numbers moving in the right direction. I didn't know how long it would take before I'd be able to truly recover, but I knew I had to keep pushing. During this time, I also began making connections in the legal field. I didn't have the money to hire a lawyer right away, but I reached out to a few people asking for advice, trying to learn everything I could about my options. I spoke to experts, lawyers, and people who had been through similar situations. Little by little, the pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Then one day I got the news I had been waiting for. I found out that my parents had put the house in both my name and my sister's name. It was a legal nightmare waiting to happen, and it was my opportunity to take action. They had used my credit, my name, to buy the house, but they hadn't realized the full consequences of their actions. It wasn't just the mortgage that was in my name. It was the ownership, too. I knew this was my moment. I wasn't going to let them get away with what they'd done to me. I hired a lawyer, one I had carefully chosen after months of research. It wasn't cheap, but I knew it was necessary. I was ready to fight back, to take control of my life and make sure that my family, my parents especially, finally faced the consequences of their betrayal. The battle was just beginning, but I felt stronger now. I had spent 2 years rebuilding my life from the ground up, and I wasn't about to stop now. The fight was going to be long, but I was ready. I wasn't the same person I had been 2 years ago. I had learned, I had grown, and now I was ready to make my move. The moment had come. After months of planning, learning, and gathering evidence, I finally filed fraud charges against my parents and my sister. Along with that, I filed a civil suit, demanding compensation for the damage they had done to my credit and my life. It was a scary step, but I was done letting them get away with it. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was about justice, about taking control of my life again. The court process was long, drawn out, and emotionally exhausting. But I stayed strong. My lawyer was confident that we had a solid case, but I couldn't help the knots of anxiety that twisted in my stomach every time I had to face them in court. My sister, who had been so brazen about her actions before, tried to act like the victim now. When it was her turn on the stand, she tried to cry her way out of everything. She spoke about how hard things had been for her, how she just wanted a stable home, and how it was all a misunderstanding. But her tears didn't move me anymore. I'd seen the real her, the one who had betrayed me, used me, and left me to pick up the pieces. Then my parents took their turn. They begged me to drop the case, claiming they never meant to hurt me, that it was just a mistake, that they had thought I wouldn't mind. My mom tried to remind me of all the things they'd done for me over the years, But I wasn't buying it anymore. It was too late for apologies. Too late for them to act like they cared. They thought I would just let it go, but I wasn't that person anymore. I stood my ground. I wasn't going to drop the case. I wasn't going to let them walk away without facing consequences for what they'd done. The court heard both sides, examined the evidence, and ultimately ruled in my favor. I couldn't believe it when I heard the verdict. It was a moment I had dreamed about for so long, and now it was finally real. My sister's house was seized. The property was sold, and the proceeds went toward paying off my debts, my legal fees, and compensating me for the financial damage they had caused. I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice wash over me as I watched everything come full circle. In the end, I got what I deserved, what I had worked so hard for. My family had no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and now I was free from the weight they had placed on me. The road to get here had been long and painful, but the victory was sweeter than I ever imagined. The fallout from everything that had happened was inevitable. My parents, unable to handle the humiliation of the court ruling, went no contact with me. At first I was hurt. I had spent so many years believing in the family bond, hoping that no matter what happened we would always have each other. But that illusion shattered the moment they chose their own comfort over doing the right thing. They couldn't bear the thought of facing me after everything they had put me through. It didn't take long for my sister's life to fall apart as well. After losing her house, she was forced to move back into their house, her only option and a place she had desperately wanted to escape from. The tables had turned. My sister, the one who had once walked around with an air of entitlement, now had to swallow her pride and live in the same house she had left behind. She never apologized for what she did to me, not even after everything that happened. But I knew deep down that this was her consequence. She would never get the stability she thought she was entitled to. As for me, life slowly started to feel like it was falling into place again. I had fought for my future and I had won. It wasn't easy and it didn't happen overnight, but I was finally on the right path. After years of struggling, I was ready to take the next step. I opened my dream cafe, the one I had always wanted. It wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of everything I had overcome. A place where I could build something of my own, free from the shackles of my past. Every inch of it was mine, from the carefully curated menu to the cozy atmosphere. I had done this myself. I had fought for it and now I was living it. The grand opening was everything I had hoped for, but the most meaningful moment came after the hustle and bustle of the day had died down. As I walked into my cafe, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I took a deep breath, soaking in the space I had built. Then my eyes fell on the framed letter on the wall, the one that proved my mortgage had been discharged, the one that marked the end of everything they had taken from me. I smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of my new life. I had fought for my freedom, my future, and now I had it all. The years of hard work, the pain, and the betrayal had led me here. And I was finally free. Using my credit without my permission ruined my life. For a while. Took away my dreams, my trust, and my security. But I refused to let that be the end of my story. I fought back, rebuilt my life from scratch, and took back everything they stole. And more. I turned my pain into strength, my loss into motivation. Now I own my success, my business, and my peace. I've learned the hardest lessons, but in the end I came out stronger. No one will ever take what's mine again. Not my family, not anyone.